The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Saskatchewan Pulse Growers, DuPont Verticin Fungicide, and Nodulator XL. So Faye, we're in an early pulse crop here, but really it's never too early to start scouting for disease.
That's right. It's good to get into a scouting routine early on in the season. At this stage, we could see some early signs of disease or even some indications of how our crop is establishing. That's really important too at the early stages. So if we look through our crop, even at the point that we're standing here, I mean, we can see some plants that are yellowing here and there. It's not a lot, but it's important to take a look at these plants and see what might the problem be in these cases. So
is this an indication for more to come? We just walked in and pulled a yellow plant. Indication of more to come?
It could be an indication of something like a root rot issue. So by pulling up the plants and checking the roots and seeing if we see any rotting or anything obvious there. If there's any particular patterns in the field, I would say just taking a quick look as we've just entered the field here, I'm not seeing any obvious patterns yet, or even just kind of looking across. But that's why it's important to also walk through the field and get as much coverage as you can to take a closer look at the plants. So an early indication that there might be some crop establishment issues or some stresses on the plants, you would see that early on and see some early signs of root rot. But in terms of the later season diseases, like the foliar diseases that we'd be considering fungicide applications for, we might see some early signs of disease here, but it's just to generally get an assessment of the crop and then continue on a regular basis going out, so that if we know that it's clean at this stage, then we can get a better idea of when that disease actually shows up by doing regular scouting every week or so, especially if we've been getting conditions that are conducive for disease, such as rain or cool wet weather, warmer conditions too that can be conducive for disease.
We're up against the end of June here. We have had quite a bit of rain in different parts of Saskatchewan. That would be definitely an early indication that we are going to probably face some disease issues.
Yeah, it's a sign that we should be paying attention to what diseases that we've had in the past and should be watching out for again under wet conditions, because most of the pulse diseases that we deal with in Saskatchewan or in Western Canada in general are fungal diseases, and fungi, they do prefer the warm, wet conditions usually. As well, with the rain, with a lot of the diseases that we deal with on pulse crops, such as the ascochyta blights, these are diseases that are spread through rain splash. So the rain itself is not only the moisture that the fungus needs in order to survive, but it can also be using it as a dispersal mechanism. So those spores will spread through rain splash. So if you get some early symptoms of disease in the field and then you get rain, you could be spreading that pathogen around.
How often should I be going out in my field to be basically looking for symptoms of disease?
Well, I think if you haven't seen any signs of disease and you've been having drier weather, you could probably extend your scouting period over once every couple weeks or so, but probably on average every week, but a little bit more often if you can, if you've had more wet conditions. And certainly if you see some sign of disease, you should be going out more often in order to monitor what that disease, if it's progressing and how it's looking on a regular basis.
A few farmers have told me that, listen, we've had rain, I know I'm going to have disease. I'm not going to bother to go out there every week because I know it's there. I'm just going to, manage it through taking care of it through a fungicide. Is that really a good management strategy?
Well, I think that the more scouting that we can do, the better, and because we can not only see how much disease is there, but to keep a really close eye on what stage our crop is at so that we can get the best timing possible. I mean, certainly to pencil in a fungicide application is not a bad idea, but you really want to time it right in order to get the most bang for your buck. And if you've had conditions that are not conducive for disease, then maybe you don't actually need to use that fungicide that you have penciled in, but at least you have it in mind. And really, timing is not going to be about a certain date on the calendar. It really comes down to what stage your crop is at, when is it most vulnerable to disease, and when is it most important for its yield development. So if you're protecting it with a fungicide, you should be protecting the stage at which the crop is determining its yield, and if it's susceptible to disease at that point, then you're getting the best protection of the most critical stage of the crop, as well as thinking about the stage of the disease. So the disease has its own life cycle as well. when is it going to be most likely to be spreading, or when is it more vulnerable to the fungicide application as well. So you kind of have to get that timing just right, where you'll get the best protection for your crop at a stage where you'll get the best yield benefit or the best protection of your yield as a result. So with pulse crops, that would be the flowering stage. So as we get closer to flowering, we should be considering a fungicide application if we've had that disease risk, because that would be the stage that would have the biggest yield impact. But again, as I mentioned, disease cycle being important. If we've seen early signs of disease and we're getting rainy conditions, we know that that disease cycle is perpetuating. So the spores are spreading, the fungus is continuing to grow and to spread around. So if you see early signs of disease, you might want to get out there a little bit earlier, but again, it has to be a good balance.